On the war-torn planet of Xylos, soldier Kalen Vance was sent to wipe out the monstrous krill. But everything changed the day he found a lost krill hatchling, small, frightened, and alone. Compassion overrode duty. He hid the creature, raised it in secret, and gave it a name: Runt. What began as a quiet act of defiance would soon brand him a traitor. When his secret was exposed, the guns of his own squad turned on him, and in that moment of betrayal, Runt stood to protect him. What could make a soldier risk everything for a monster? This is a story of an unlikely bond, a man and the creature he was ordered to destroy, forged in loyalty, tested by war, and destined to challenge everything they thought they knew. Emotional, thrilling, unforgettable. This is the story of Kalen and Runt, and once it begins, you won't be able to look away. The name alone, Krill, sent chills down the spine of even the most hardened soldier. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, covered in charcoal black armored skin, their claws curved like sickles and glowing crimson eyes held a primal fury. Their roars, echoing from the depths of caverns, felt like curses from the dark itself. Kalen had seen what they were capable of: flattened outposts, shredded machines, and fallen comrades torn to pieces. He knew how dangerous they were, and he knew why they had to be destroyed. Yet deep inside, Kalen harbored a flicker of doubt. Intelligence reports painted the krill as nothing more than killing machines. But in the flash of plasma fire, during fleeting skirmishes, he had seen something else. Fierce protection of smaller krill, mournful cries when one of their own fell. Was it merely instinct? Or was there something deeper behind those monstrous exteriors? Then came the day everything changed. After a routine sweep through a suspected krill cave system turned up empty, Kalen's unit trudged back, disappointed. Covered in dust, Kalen broke off from the others to check a narrow side tunnel he'd missed earlier. His tactical flashlight scanned the damp walls, catching glimmers of strange crystals. Then he froze. Curled up in a dark crevice like a trembling, scruffy ball of fur was a baby krill. It was much smaller, barely 1/2 meter tall. Its skin was soft, and though its red eyes still shimmered with that otherworldly light, what Kalen saw in them was pure terror. The tiny creature whimpered and trembled, helpless and alone. Kalen stood motionless, his plasma rifle gripped tight. Protocol was clear: terminate on sight. Even this small, it was krill. Still dangerous, still a threat. He'd been trained to feel nothing. No pity, no mercy. Just eliminate. But something stirred inside him. Not fear, but sorrow. This wasn't a monster. It was a child, frightened and alone in the dark. His hands shook as he lowered the rifle. The wind howled outside the cave like a warning. If he left it here, it wouldn't survive. A reckless, borderline insane idea formed in his mind. He could hide it. He could care for it. He could protect it. It went against everything he'd been taught. But looking into those scared, crimson eyes, Kalen couldn't pull the trigger. He crept closer, murmuring nonsense to calm the creature. The little krill didn't flee. Maybe it sensed he meant no harm. After a long pause, he reached out and touched it. Its skin was warm, slightly rough. He lifted it, lighter than expected, and tucked it inside his thick coat, muffling its soft whimpers. Back at the outpost, Kalen's heart pounded. He'd crossed a line. If anyone found out, he'd face a court-martial, maybe worse. Days turned into weeks. In secret, Kalen fed the creature scraps from the kitchen, kept it hidden in his quarters. He gave it a name, Runt, and Runt grew fast. Fear gave way to curiosity, and something else Kalen hadn't expected, affection. The little krill trusted him, snuggling close as he read, chirping happily when he brought food. Kalen began to recognize patterns in Runt's sounds and gestures. The krill had a language, emotions. Runt wasn't just a creature anymore. He was a friend. Someone Kalen loved, secretly, fiercely, but secrets don't stay buried forever. One day, during a surprise inspection, the hard-nosed Sergeant Valerius found strange claw marks and scraps of alien hide in Kalen's room. Alarms blared. Battalion 349 was ordered to assemble. Valerius's face was stone cold as he pointed at Kalen's quarters. "Lieutenant Vance," he growled, "care to explain what we found in your room?" Kalen stood surrounded by eyes full of suspicion and hostility. He knew the moment had come. Down the hallway, Runt stood in shadow, now much larger, watching him, eyes wide with worry. Kalen took a breath, steadying his voice. "It's a young krill. I found him in a cave." Gasps, anger, outrage rippled through the ranks. "A krill?" Valerius barked. "You didn't kill it? You've been raising that monster under our noses." "He's not a monster," Kalen tried to explain, but his voice was drowned in shouts. "Attack! Kill the traitor's beast!" someone yelled. Weapons were raised. Plasma barrels glowed. Kalen stood frozen, helpless. But Runt didn't run. He stood like a mountain, placing his massive body between Kalen and the guns. His crimson eyes flared orange with rage. A deafening roar shattered the silence, and Runt charged toward Kalen, not to attack, but to shield him, to protect his father. Blasts of plasma ripped through the air, white-blue streaks slicing across the hallway like lightning. Kalen squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the searing pain that should have followed. But instead came a blast of heat across his face and a bone-shaking impact that rattled the walls. He opened his eyes. Runt had taken the hit. The massive krill stood between Kalen and the oncoming fire, its thick hide absorbing the hailstorm of plasma rounds. Energy sizzled on contact, scorching black lines across its body, smoke rising from the burns. Runt roared in agony but refused to fall. His orange-red eyes blazed, locked onto the stunned soldiers with primal fury. "No, Runt, stop! You don't have to do this!" Kalen screamed, trying to pull the creature back, but its strength was far beyond his. He's protecting him," a soldier stammered, his weapon shaking in disbelief. The shock didn't last. "He's brainwashed. That thing's turned him," Sergeant Valerius bellowed, rage overtaking reason. "Fire! Kill them both!" Another wave of plasma fire erupted, this time aimed at both Kalen and Runt. Kalen scrambled for cover, but the corridor offered no shelter. All he could do was watch, helpless, as Runt took the hits, again and again. Runt roared in defiance and pain, his cries a haunting mix of suffering and wrath. He slashed his claws at the advancing troops, holding them at bay, but there were too many, and their weapons were too powerful. Thick, black blood began to drip from gashes in his body. "Stop! Please, stop!" Kalen begged, struggling against the arms holding him back. "He's not trying to hurt anyone. He's just trying to protect me." "Protect you?" Valerius barked. "It's a krill, a killer. Have you forgotten what they've done? How many of our brothers they've slaughtered? Images flooded Kalen's mind. Bloodied faces, unanswered cries for help. He understood the hatred. He felt the grief. But Runt was different. In the chaos, Runt twisted around, throwing back a group of soldiers closing in on Kalen. Then he dipped his head, gently bumping Kalen's chest. A signal, a plea. His glowing eyes burned with purpose. "Runt, what are you doing?" Kalen whispered. Runt answered with a final roar, turned and bolted, charging down the corridor and smashing through the outpost's exit into the brutal wilderness outside. "He's running! Don't let it escape!" Valerius roared, dispatching a squad to pursue. Kalen thrashed against the guards. "No, don't hurt him! He's just trying to get away!" No one listened. He was dragged to a cold, dark holding cell. Alone, Kalen sat in silence, listening to the distant crack of gunfire. His heart ached with guilt. He'd betrayed his comrades, and now Runt was paying the price. Time passed slowly. Eventually, the cell door creaked open. Valerius stood there, his expression unreadable. "The council has ruled," he said flatly. "Your actions are inexcusable. You colluded with the enemy and endangered this entire outpost." "But Runt's not the enemy," Kalen shot back. "He saved me. Your delusion is astounding," Valerius cut him off. "You're stripped of rank and will face a court-martial. And as for that creature, we'll hunt it down. We'll finish what you couldn't." Kalen dropped his head. He'd lost everything. His rank, his team's trust, and maybe Runt. In the days that followed, Kalen lived in a haze of regret and fear. He replayed every moment with Runt, the trust in those glowing eyes, the joyful chirps, the warmth of his presence. He'd been foolish to think he could hide this forever. Selfish, even. He'd let his feelings outweigh his duty. Then one night, as he dozed in the cell's darkness, a sound shattered the stillness. A familiar roar ripped through the night. Gunfire, screams, panic. Kalen shot up, slamming his fists against the cell door. "What's going on? That's Runt, isn't it?" A guard, pale and trembling, looked in. "The Krill. They're attacking. A whole swarm. We've never seen this many, ever." Kalen's chest tightened. Runt had come back. But why? Why would he risk his life returning to a place that saw him as a threat? The roars drew closer, louder, angrier. Then, the walls of the cell began to shake. A massive shadow loomed outside the door. Glowing red eyes pierced the darkness. It was Runt. With a snarl, Runt tore the reinforced metal door apart like paper, stepped inside, and looked down at Kalen. His body was marked with fresh wounds and dried blood, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. "Runt, you..." Kalen choked. Runt gave a low growl, nuzzled Kalen's arm, then turned toward the chaos outside. He wanted Kalen with him. Kalen understood. Runt hadn't returned just for him. There was something more. Maybe Runt sensed the danger threatening the outpost. Maybe somewhere in that monstrous heart, there was still a thread tied to the place he once called home. Kalen had no choice. He grabbed the plasma rifle the guard had dropped and ran with Runt, straight into the firestorm. He was a traitor to his unit, but to Runt, he was everything. And now, together, they would face whatever darkness Xylos had left to throw at them. The corridors of Outpost Echo 7 had descended into utter chaos. Plasma fire roared through the air, mixing with the screams of terrified soldiers and the guttural, savage howls of the invading krill. Emergency lights flickered, casting twisted shadows of monstrous figures on the walls, turning the hall into a vision of hell. Kalen, plasma rifle clutched tight, moved alongside Runt. The massive krill barreled through the firefight with terrifying speed and precision. Its claws tore through anything in its way. But this wasn't mindless destruction. This was protection. Runt roared, not like a beast, but like a guardian, like a father shielding his child. Soldiers stared in disbelief as Kalen advanced beside the creature, their expressions twisted in shock, then rage. "Vance, what the hell are you doing? You're helping them!" Sergeant Valerius shouted, his weapon still aimed squarely at Kalen. "No, they're not attacking us! They're responding!" Kalen shouted over the chaos, his voice strained and desperate. He saw it now. The krill weren't lashing out at random. They were converging on one location, the eastern storage wing. They had a purpose, but no one listened. The hatred for the krill was too deep, too old. All they saw was betrayal, a soldier standing with the enemy. "Kill them both!" Valerius roared. "Take out the traitor and his monster!" Weapons turned toward Kalen. Runt snarled, ready to leap, but Kalen grabbed his arm. "No, Runt, don't! They're my team! Or at least they were." They were caught between two worlds, between human hatred and krill fury. Kalen realized he had dragged them both into a firestorm they might not survive. Through the chaos, Kalen's eyes locked on the krill's movements. They were swarming the eastern warehouse, clawing at its reinforced doors. "They're not here to kill us. They're targeting the storage wing," Kalen yelled toward Valerius, trying to be heard over the carnage. Valerius didn't flinch. He glanced Kalen's way with eyes full of contempt. "Shut up, traitor! You're just trying to confuse us!" Kalen gritted his teeth. Words weren't enough. It was time to act. "Runt, come with me!" Together, man and monster pushed forward, carving a path through the chaos. Kalen fired at any krill that lunged at them, while Runt tore down barriers with brute strength. It was a bizarre but lethal rhythm, a trained soldier and a war-born beast, fighting as one. They reached the warehouse doors, which had already been shredded by the krill's claws. Inside, a strange glow flickered, and Kalen could hear something pulsing. "Be careful," he whispered to Runt, and they stepped inside. What Kalen saw stopped him cold. It wasn't a weapons cache. It wasn't ammo or tech. It was a nursery. Dozens of large, glistening cocoons pulsed gently in the low light. Inside, Kalen could make out the shapes of infant krill, curled and still developing. This is their breeding ground," he murmured, realization crashing into him. The krill weren't attacking out of malice. They were defending their children. Echo 7 had been built on sacred ground, right on top of their hatching site. He turned to Runt. The massive creature stood frozen, its burning eyes softening as it looked at the cocoons. Kalen felt it, a wave of protective instinct radiating from him. "They're just afraid for their young," Kalen said quietly. "Just like you were afraid for me, Runt." Runt looked at him and gave a low, gentle growl, a sound of agreement. Then, chaos burst in through the door behind them. Valerius and a squad of soldiers stormed into the warehouse, weapons raised. "There you are!" Valerius barked. His eyes widened as he saw the cocoons. "So this is what they're protecting. Their nest." We end it now. Wipe them all out. No. Kalen stepped between them, arms outstretched. You don't understand. They're not a threat unless we make them one. They're protecting their young, just like we would. You've completely lost it, Vance, Valerius growled. They're bloodthirsty monsters. You think they'll spare us? They will if we spare them, Kalen snapped back. We invaded their territory. We built on top of their home. We're the invaders here, and if we keep pushing, we'll only provoke more bloodshed. Some of the younger soldiers hesitated, glancing at one another. Doubt crept into their eyes, but Valerius wouldn't budge. Orders are orders, he barked. Eliminate all krill in the area. The tension reached a breaking point. Kalen stood between his squad mates and Runt's kin, between orders and conscience. He had to choose. He looked at Runt. The massive krill stood beside him, eyes burning with trust. Runt had saved him without hesitation. Now it was Kalen's turn. I won't let you hurt them, Kalen said, his voice like steel. He raised his plasma rifle and aimed it at his fellow soldiers. If you want to kill them, he said, you'll have to go through me first. Silence fell like a hammer. The soldiers stared, stunned. Lieutenant Vance, their brother in arms, was now defending the enemy. Vance, what are you doing? One soldier stammered. I'm doing what's right, Kalen said. We don't have the right to destroy innocent life just because we fear it. We were wrong to come here. We were wrong to build over their home. And we'll be wrong again if we keep spilling blood. Valerius's jaw clenched tight, fury radiating off him. You've crossed the line, Vance. You're a traitor. Maybe I am, Kalen said, but I won't stand by while innocents are slaughtered. His finger tightened on the trigger. The air was thick, electric. One wrong move and it would all ignite. Kalen knew he'd reached the point of no return. He had chosen his path, chosen Runt, chosen to stand for those he once swore to eliminate. He stood now among monsters, not just krill, but men too. The war on Xylos had become his war. The suffocating silence inside the warehouse seemed to stretch forever. The soldiers stared at Kalen with a storm of emotions: shock, anger, confusion, and in some, a flicker of doubt. The plasma rifle in Kalen's hands remained steady, trained on them. An invisible line had been drawn, one that separated him from the men he once called brothers. Sergeant Valerius was the first to break the deadlock. A cold, sharp chuckle escaped his lips. How pathetic, he sneered. You really think you can stop an entire battalion for a monster? You've completely lost it, Vance. I'm not trying to stop you, Kalen replied, his voice calm despite the knot tightening in his chest. I'm asking you to see the truth. The krill are attacking because they feel threatened. They're protecting their young. If we leave them alone, maybe this doesn't have to end in more blood. Maybe, Valerius scoffed. You're clinging to a dream, Lieutenant. These things are killers, born to destroy. You really believe your compassion can change what they are? I don't know, Kalen said honestly. But I know every living being deserves a chance. Runt. He saved my life. He showed me that not all krill are mindless beasts. He looked over at Runt, the towering creature now standing motionless at his side, orange-red eyes locked onto the soldiers with unwavering awareness. He feels. He's loyal. He has a family. Kalen pointed to the gently pulsing cocoons. A few younger soldiers hesitated, their eyes drifting toward the harmless, softly vibrating eggs. But the hatred rooted in their hearts ran too deep. "Enough, Vance. You made your choice," Valerius growled. "You're a traitor, and you're going to pay for it." He barked a new command. "Take him down! Kill the beast!" This time, there was no hesitation. Weapons snapped into position, boots thundered forward. Kalen didn't wait. He'd made his stand. Now, he would fight for it. "Runt! We've got to move!" Kalen shouted, retreating toward the cocoons. Plasma fire tore through the air as he returned fire, covering their retreat. Runt let out a furious roar, claws slicing wide through the air, forming a living barricade. But it was just the two of them, against a battalion. They couldn't hold forever. Kalen knew that. They needed a way out. His eyes flicked toward the far end of the warehouse, a heavy metal door, a way out. "Runt! That door! Tear it open!" Kalen yelled, pointing. Runt understood instantly. He charged the back exit, slamming into it with explosive force. Claws ripped at steel. With every strike, the door groaned, buckled, cracked. Kalen weaved between the cocoons, using them as cover while firing bursts of plasma to keep the soldiers back. Finally, with one last roar, the door gave way, revealing a dark tunnel beyond. "This way," Kalen called. He sprinted toward the tunnel, heart pounding. Runt growled one last warning at the soldiers, then turned and followed. They ran, through darkness, away from the only home Kalen had known for months. Behind them, the sounds of battle faded into echoes. He didn't know where the tunnel led, but he knew they couldn't go back. They were fugitives now. The tunnel opened into a vast, damp cave. Kalen collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. Runt stood beside him, breathing heavy but alive. "We made it," Kalen whispered, glancing over his shoulder at the blackness behind them. But he knew this wasn't over. The pursuit would come. They wouldn't stop. He looked at Runt, who gazed back with warm, glowing eyes. The krill nudged Kalen's arm with his head, a gesture they'd shared many times. "You've risked everything for me, Runt," Kalen said, his voice thick with emotion. "Why? Why protect me?" Runt gave a soft rumble, then nudged Kalen's chest again, as if to say, "You already know the answer." And Kalen did. Runt didn't need a reason. His loyalty was unconditional. To him, Kalen wasn't just a soldier. He was family. There in the cave's shadow, Kalen made a vow. He would protect Runt, just as Runt had protected him. He would find a safe place for Runt and for the krill offspring, somewhere untouched by war or fear. He might be a traitor to his own kind, but he would never betray Runt. They stayed hidden in the cave for days, resting and recovering. Kalen foraged for food and water using his training, and Runt's wild instincts proved just as valuable. Together, they survived. Together, they became something more. Eventually, they moved on, deeper into the wilds of Xylos. Kalen held on to hope that somewhere on this ravaged planet, there was a place where peace could grow. A place where krill and humans might one day coexist. It was a fragile hope, but it was all he had. Their journey led them through sandstorms, across scorched plains, and into the lairs of other violent native beasts. Always running, always watching the skies for the drones, for the hunters. But they kept going, driven by loyalty, love, and something even rarer on Xylos. compassion. Through Runt, Kalin learned more about the krill than any report ever told. They had a language, a society, a deep emotional complexity. They weren't killers by nature. They were survivors, defenders, parents, and Runt. Runt wasn't just a krill. He was Kalin's partner, his protector, his family. In a world drowning in blood and hatred, they'd found something else. A bond forged in defiance, held together by love. But Kalin knew peace wouldn't last forever. The war was still out there. Xylos still burned. Their futures still hung in the balance. They were hunted. They were hated. But they weren't alone. And for Kalin Vance, that was enough to keep fighting. His oath, the traitor's vow, burned bright inside him still. A promise he would keep, no matter the cost. Kalin and Runt's journey across Xylos became a long, grueling march through months of unforgiving wilderness. They hid in shadowy caves, crossed searing desert plains, and evaded the relentless patrols of the battalion that hunted them. Each day was a battle for survival, but their bond only grew stronger. What began as a fragile alliance had become an unbreakable friendship. Kalin had learned to communicate with Runt through gestures, sounds, and unspoken understanding. Runt was ever watchful, shielding Kalin from predators and hazards in the wild. On cold nights beneath the starlit skies of Xylos, Kalin would rest against Runt's warm, coarse hide, feeling a strange peace beside the creature he was once ordered to kill. But peace never lasts long on Xylos. One day, while sheltering in a narrow canyon, the distant whir of patrol ships echoed through the cliffs, growing louder. They'd been found. "They're here, Runt," Kalin whispered, eyes scanning the graying sky. "We have to move." They ran deeper into the canyon, desperate for an exit. But the ships surrounded the ravine. Harsh beams of light swept through the cracks, stripping away any hope of escape. "There's no way out," Kalin muttered, gripping his plasma rifle. He looked to Runt, whose burning orange eyes reflected pure resolve. Then came the voice, booming from a loudspeaker overhead. "Kalin Vance, you are surrounded. Surrender immediately. Any resistance will be met with force." Kalin felt a crushing weight in his chest. This was his fault. He had dragged Runt into this, made him a target. Runt growled softly and nudged Kalin's hand, reassuring, as always. Then he rose, massive and defiant, standing between Kalin and the hovering ships. "No, Runt! Don't!" Kalin shouted, trying to pull him back. "This is my fight! You don't have to!" But Runt didn't move. He let out a fierce roar toward the ships, then turned and met Kalin's eyes with unwavering loyalty. Kalin understood. Runt wasn't leaving him. Not now. Not ever. "All right then, my friend," Kalin whispered, a tear slipping down his cheek. "We face them together." He took his place beside Runt, rifle raised. A traitor and a monster, united. Outnumbered, outgunned, but not outmatched in spirit. The ships opened fire. Plasma ripped through the air. Kalin and Runt danced between light and shadow, dodging blasts and returning fire. Runt shielded Kalin with his body, taking blast after blast while Kalin fired at the encroaching ships. But the enemy was overwhelming. Runt staggered, his hide scorched and smoking. Kalin was hit too, sharp, searing pain slicing through him. "Runt, we can't hold them much longer," Kalen gasped. Runt roared in pain, but still stood, still fought. Then he looked at Kalen and pointed toward a narrow passage at the back of the canyon. "Go, Kalen," a voice echoed inside Kalen's mind. Rough, guttural Runt's voice, clear and real. Kalen's breath caught. He'd never heard Runt speak like that before. "No, I'm not leaving you," he shouted. "Save the others, the young." Runt's mental voice was fading. He nodded toward the far end of the ravine, toward hope. "I will hold them." Tears streamed down Kalen's face. "No, we're getting out of this. Together." But Runt had made up his mind. He shoved Kalen toward the passage with one giant claw. "Go, Father." The word hit Kalen like a thunderclap. He had never imagined hearing it from a krill. Above, the ships rained plasma down on Runt. He roared in agony, but never stepped aside, never wavered. "Runt, no!" Kalen cried, trying to scramble back. But Runt's final shove knocked him deep into the shadows of the escape path. "Live, Kalen." The voice echoed one last time, then vanished into the roar of plasma fire. Kalen lay there, helpless in the dark, listening to Runt's final roar, then the terrible sound of metal and flesh being torn apart. His heart shattered. He had lost Runt, his friend, his son, his protector, who gave everything to save him. With a strangled cry, Kalen rose to his feet, pain blazing through him, but his eyes burned with resolve. Runt's sacrifice would not be in vain. Kalen ran deeper into the canyon, carrying a broken heart and a sacred promise. Eventually, the passage opened into a hidden valley, lush and green, untouched by war. There, Kalen found more krill cocoons. Adult krill stood guard over them, eyeing him with suspicion. Kalen raised his hands and knelt. He told them about Runt, about the sacrifice, about their friendship. At first, they didn't believe him, but the grief in his voice, the tears on his face, the weight in his eyes, that was something they couldn't ignore. They let him stay. For weeks, Kalen lived among the krill. He learned their ways, their language, their culture. He saw the beauty and depth in their society. They weren't monsters. They were just people. People who had lost too much. Eventually, with the krill's help, Kalen found a way to contact the outside world. He told the story of Runt, the truth about Echo 7, the eggs, the lives. At first, no one listened. He was dismissed as a madman, a traitor. But over time, the footage he'd recorded, the data he'd collected, it all began to shift public opinion. A full investigation followed. The truth came out. Outpost Echo 7 had been built atop a krill breeding ground. Questions swirled across the galaxy about how the Galactic Union treated alien life. And finally, the war ended. Not in flames, but in understanding. A sanctuary was established on Xylos, a place where humans and krill could coexist, where peace was not a fantasy, but a fragile, blooming reality. Kalen returned to Earth, not as a war hero, but as a broken man with a sacred mission. He spent the rest of his life fighting for the rights of alien species, telling the story of Runt, the krill who taught him about love, loyalty, and sacrifice. Xylos was no longer a bruised scar in the stars. It had become a symbol of reconciliation, a living reminder that even among the deepest hatred, compassion could grow. And on quiet nights, When the wind howled through the crags of Xylos, they said you could still hear it, the distant cry of a loyal beast. A lullaby, a legend, the final song of Xylos, the song of a monster who loved a soldier like a father.